Bore da pawb, croeso I Nesta Talks 2. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Nesta Talks 2. This is our conversational event series with today's most exciting thinkers on the big topics related to our missions and innovation methods. My name's Andy Regan. I'm Senior Mission Manager for a Sustainable Future in Nesta Cymru. For those who don't know us, Nesta is the UK's innovation agency for social good. We design, test and scale solutions to society's biggest problems. Our three missions are to help people live healthier lives, give every child a fairer start, and in a sustainable future, our mission is to accelerate the decarbonisation of household activities in the UK. I look after all Sustainable Futures work on energy flexibility, as well as our projects in Wales, where today's guest is based. So I'm really pleased to introduce Eileen Kinsman, co-CEO of the Centre for Alternative Technology, which we'll be calling CAT throughout the event, which sits just outside Machynlleth in mid-Wales. Eileen has worked for charities and organisations campaigning on environmental, human rights and social justice issues for nearly 30 years. She moved to Mid Wales in 2001 to take up a post as Administrative Director at CAT, later leaving to teach in the Department of Voluntary Sector Studies at the University of Wales Trinity St David's. And although Eileen left CAT in 2004, she says you can never really leave CAT, and she was delighted to return in 2018 as Head of Development. She's also worked for the Wales Council for Voluntary Action and as Head of External Affairs at the National Library for Wales. So welcome, Eileen. We'll be talking to Eileen about CAT's mission, its past, present and future, and what insights she has to share for others working on sustainability and decarbonisation. Hi Eileen, how are you doing?
Hi Andy, thanks.
A little bit of housekeeping. We'll come on to housewarming later when we talk about heat pumps. Housekeeping before we start. I wanted to invite our audience to join the conversation in the comments box on the right-hand side of your screen and ask any questions throughout the event, and we'll get to those a little later on. If you want closed captions for the event, they can be accessed via the LinkedIn live stream. So great. So, hi Eileen, thanks for joining us today. For anyone who's listening who's maybe never heard of the Centre for Alternative Technology, can you give us the elevator pitch? Like who are you and what do you do?
So the Centre for Alternative Technology, or CAT as we're affectionately known, is an internationally renowned environmental charity, a world-leading eco-centre and one of the foremost providers of postgraduate sustainability education here in the UK. We are an educational charity dedicated to researching and communicating positive solutions for environmental change. We provide skills, knowledge and inspiration to enable people to go out and make a difference on the climate and biodiversity emergency. We offer a wide range of courses, including short courses, master's degrees in everything sustainability related, from renewable energy and green building to sustainable food production and ecology. We also welcome visits from schools, universities, colleges, community groups, and other organisations. Our Zero Carbon Britain Hub and Innovation Lab provides training, resources, and support for councils and communities across the United Kingdom. We've got ambitious and transformative plans to scale up what we do in response to the climate and biodiversity emergency. Our vision is a sustainable future for all humanity as part of a thriving natural world. And our mission is to inspire, inform and enable humanity to respond to the climate and biodiversity emergency. The Centre for Alternative Technology is based in Llangwren Quarry, as you said, just north of Machynlleth in Powys in Mid Wales. The site where we're based was a working slate quarry when Wales was at the forefront of global slate manufacture. It had been disused for several decades when we moved onto site in 1973. And over the last 50 years, we've regenerated the slate quarry and transformed it so that it now has a range of different wildlife habitats and sustainably managed gardens and woodlands. It's home to a wide variety of wildlife, including protected species like dormice, pine martens, and rare bats. And the site has also got a really wide range of renewable technologies installed on site so that our students and visiting groups get hands-on experience. Across all of our education work, CAT's always taken a unique approach. So one where people learn through doing and testing creative thinking in an immersive natural environment.
So I'm lucky enough to have been to the site a few times. I was a student in Aberystwyth, so I was probably first went there about 20 years ago or something. So I've got a good sense in my head of what it's like. But from a visitor's point of view, like you've touched on this a little, but what sort of things do people see and interact with when they come to the centre, either in a group or by themselves?
So it's evolved a lot over the last 50 years. We've been pioneering renewable technologies since 73 and installing renewable technologies since 73. So there's a lot of, as I said, there's a wide range of renewable technologies installed on site, hydro, wind turbines, solar, and we've got a lot of a range of different sustainable buildings that have evolved over the last 50 years. So when people are here on site, they can interact with those buildings and with those technologies. And in really, I mean, it's absolutely stunningly beautiful. The sun's out, you can kind of see behind me. It's out today. It's not always out. It has rained almost constantly, I think, for the last 5 months. But it's a really, it's a beautiful site. And I think it's one of the things for me, it's one of the really special things about CAT. It's a really special place. And that when you come here, either when you come here to study or come on one of our courses or come for a visit, it's an immersive experience. You're immersed in nature. You get that connection with nature that you perhaps can't get elsewhere. And that's a really important part of our learning experience, our regenerative education approach.
Yeah, I think it's really kind of hands-on and practical, even as just like a day visitor. But I know you've perhaps we'll come back to this in a moment. You've emphasised like how practical the education courses are, and you've touched on like how long CAT has been around, part of the mix, over 50 years. So just tell us a little about the history, like when and how did it begin? Who started it? What were they setting out to achieve when the centre was first created?
Yeah, of course. So CAT was founded as a charity in 1973. It was our 50th birthday last year. We're one of the longest, most well-established environmental organisations in the UK. So in 1973, there wasn't the awareness of climate change that there is now, but there was growing environmental awareness, both here in the UK and in the US. There have been the publication of seminal works such as Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, Schumacher's Small is Beautiful, Limits to Resources. 73, there was the oil crisis. So there was a growing concern about living within planetary boundaries and living more sustainably. So our founders had a vision to set up a centre where simpler, less damaging lifestyles could be researched and demonstrated to the public. So we've been pioneering renewable technologies, low energy buildings, and growing food in low impact ways since 1973. The first hydro was installed on site in 1974, the first wind turbine in 1975, the first completely solar heated building in the United Kingdom in 1975, complete with interseasonal heat store. We, in conjunction with Waits Building Company, we built the Waits Conservation House at CAT in 1976. And that is still probably the most well-insulated house in Europe. And it was built complete with air source heat pump in 1976. And it still beats many of the homes, sadly, that are being built in the UK today. We published the first alternative energy strategy for the UK in 1977, which also includes heat pumps. And we have a long history of innovation and entrepreneurship and spinning out sustainable businesses and inventions. So there was a solar-powered fridge that was invented at CAT in 1972. It's used to store vaccines in off-grid locations. So it's used for cold storage in off-grid locations around the world. It's now it's manufactured by Dillis Engineering, that are a spin-out company from CAT, based in Machynlleth, and they manufacture and export these solar-powered fridges to off-grid locations around the world. It's been really important in the last few years in the fight against COVID, and has saved millions of lives around the world.
Yeah, and it's a really nice example of it, like a technology that's perhaps designed from one perspective, like a sustainability perspective, but then achieves much more when you put it into a different context, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I mean, we'll come back to technology a little more. But you said when we spoke last week, the name's almost a little misleading, isn't it? Centre for Alternative Technology, because what you do, so much of what you do is not just about technology itself. You do a lot in the education space, and you've also thought a lot about behaviour change. So, you just tell us a bit more about the sorts of things you've been doing on education and behaviour change.
Yes, absolutely. So education has been core to what we do from the beginning. So we started offering courses in renewable energy and sustainable building from the 1980s onwards. We've been welcoming school and university groups to the site right from the beginning. And I've met many people in my career who've told me that it was a visit to CAT as a child, on a school visit or with a family that inspired them to their career choice in sustainability. So it's had a massive impact over the years in inspiring people to sustainable careers. So in response to the need to scale up training in environmental solutions, we've added many more types of courses over the years. We now offer postgraduate degrees, professional skills, and training for councils and communities. We currently have 8 different master's degrees in architecture, green building, energy, food and land use, ecology, adaptation, research methods, and behaviour change. We currently have over 700 master's students studying with us, which makes us one, if not the master's programme in the United Kingdom. We have a unique pedagogy which runs across all of our educational offer. So it's innovative, creative, practical, hands-on, and holistic. If you study in a traditional university, you're often a passive learner in a classroom environment. But if you study at CAT, then you're an active participant immersed in nature. You can study architecture and green building elsewhere in the United Kingdom, and you can go through your entire architecture education without ever actually building anything, which to me just seems unbelievable. Whereas if you study at CAT, our architecture and green building students have something called Build Week, where they design structures at CAT or out in the community, and then the students vote on which of the designs they like best, and then we give them the budget and the tools and the skills to go and build the 4 winning designs. We've got a much higher rate of graduate startups and entrepreneurship than traditional universities, and I think there's a number of reasons for this. So innovation and entrepreneurship's a push-pull motivation. Our students are highly motivated. They want to change the world. They want to save the planet. And CAT provides them with the skills to enable them to do that. And then lastly, at CAT, they meet other like-minded individuals. So many of our students go on to set up sustainable businesses with students that they've met while studying at CAT. So examples of these are companies like Indie Nature. So Indie Nature was set up by a number of CAT graduates. Last year, they opened the UK's first dedicated natural insulation materials factory in the Scottish Borders, with £3 million of investment from Scottish Government. We've got quite a number of graduate startups that are working in making sustainable construction materials, so making sustainable alternatives to concrete and plasterboard. And another one of these is called Adaptivate, and it's recently been awarded £3 million of funding from UK government, and they're working on developing sustainable alternatives to plasterboard and manufacturing these. Another example is here in Wales. CAT graduate Owen Morgan set up Exio Energy and Cambridge Solar, which is an award-winning renewable energy company with offices in Oxford, Cambridge, Cardiff, and Machynlleth. So as well as our master's level education, we also deliver short courses and experience days, which allow people of all ages to develop their knowledge in areas including renewable energy, environmentally friendly building techniques, ecology, woodland management, and organic gardening. So we offer one-day visits to more in-depth week-long courses, and we provide people with opportunities to learn practical skills to make changes in their own lives or work, or simply to slow down and reconnect with nature. Our green skills training courses range from training for people who want to find out more about making their own home energy efficient, for example, by installing solar power, heat pumps, and insulation, to building professionals who need to understand more sustainable ways of working, such as how to use natural materials or retrofit existing buildings sustainably. We also welcome visits from schools, colleges, and universities, as well as other groups such as community groups, businesses, charities, many of whom join us for team training or away days, or bring their conferences and events to CAT. In just the last few weeks, we've had visits from Oxford University, UCL, Greenwich University, Leeds University. Tomorrow, we've got Cambridge University Engineering for Sustainable Development students arriving on site. Our site provides students with the opportunity to get their hands dirty, digging deeper into sustainability-related topics in a distraction-free environment where they can dedicate time and attention to their studies. School groups come for the day, or they can join us for a residential trip for a few days or more. We run school workshops on renewable energy, green building, growing and ecology, and other aspects of sustainability. And these run right across a range of curriculum subjects, including science, geography, design and technology, and citizenship. And all of them help young people to develop key skills in literacy and maths, and emphasize problem solving.
So there's a really nice thread that runs through so much of what you've just outlined, and it's a huge amount that you do. Constantly coming back to the practical, hands-on, getting hands dirty, and I think there's something that we've thought about a lot in our own mission work, and as we're very focused on heat pumps and trying to drive uptake of that in the short term to speed up the pace of this. But a lot of these technologies feel unfamiliar to people and feel quite, a lot of people haven't seen one, for example. So we're testing a service that allows people to visit one in someone else's home if they're willing to do that. And all of that is, I think, partly around the fact that we're, as you are, very focused on behavioral science at quite an individual level, and what can kind of help people take the next step on their journey. So that I know that's a part of some of the educational work, like you, as well as trying to prompt behavior change, you also sort of study behavior change, or you have master students who are doing work on that. So from perhaps like a policymaker's point of view, what are some of the most kind of interesting insights CAT has come up with around behavior change that could inform, for example, how to design policies around net zero?
So thanks, Andy. I think there's a lot of synergies between the work that Nesta's doing and the work that CAT's doing, and a lot of your recommendations around heat pumps kind of chime with our thinking over the years. So the need, with heat pumps, people need to understand how they work, and our eco-centre manager says they need to actually be able to kick it. So, we've got heat pumps installed on site, and it's that kind of demonstrator element of it that is one of the things that I think is really important. So in terms of useful insights from our work on behaviour change and influencing policymakers, what I would say is we need bold, ambitious, near-term action on climate change. The next decade is absolutely critical, and we can't afford to wait. We can't afford to risk relying on unproven future technology. So Kat's work shows how much is possible without relying on silver bullets. And the UK needs to show leadership with ambitious policies that meet the scale of the challenge. And we must start today to invest in the proven technologies and behaviour changes that can get us on the path to net zero as quickly as possible. And the government has a vital role to play in that. So we need multi-year government investment in retrofitting insulation and heat pumps. We need investment in powering up renewables, particularly wind power. We need investment in public transport and infrastructure for walking and cycling. We need to transform diets and the way we use land. And we need people with the skills and knowledge to plan and deliver the solutions at scale and speed, and the speed demanded by the climate science. So the Innovation Lab model that we've designed and delivered at CAT is co-creative. It's based on design thinking, it's experimental, sense-making and systemic. And through this and a series of training courses, we've guided a diverse range of people and organisations to develop solutions, break barriers and seize opportunities. So I think there's a number of elements of the lab that are really important. So first of all, it's co-creative. So we include key stakeholders to draw on a range of perspectives and experiences to inform the process, and ultimately to co-design solutions that are fit for purpose and feasible. Secondly, it uses design thinking. So it takes a user-centered approach based on the experience of those that are impacted by the problem and those that deliver the solution. It's experimental, so it takes an iterative approach, prototyping interventions and amending them until they're right, learning from failure along the way. It's sense-making, so it helps participants understand what's happening and why, and to let go of preconceived ideas and be open to new approaches. And it's systemic, so it ensures that the ideas developed go beyond dealing with the symptoms to actually address the root cause of the problem. And I think there's lots of synergies there with Nesta's work. So further points that we've learned from the innovation labs that I think are important for policymakers. We need an end to silo working, and instead we need people to work collaboratively across departments and sectors to ensure better policy making and less contradictory policies. We need participatory methods, so co-creation with citizens to build meaningful engagement, to give participants a voice in their own future, and to help build a mandate and democratic legitimacy for change and for bolder approaches. We need transformational change in the face of the climate and biodiversity emergency, and that calls for systemic approaches. Complex and uncertain futures require shifts to new kinds of systems for meeting societal needs, including new approaches to policymaking. Policymakers need to be supported in imagining and futuring. If we can't create policies to change or improve the future if we don't have the creative skills to imagine it in the first place. So policymakers need to be able to step outside the box and to think big and bold. We need to provide structured approaches to experimentation, purposive interventions designed to innovate and learn and gain experience. And all of it, as I've said before, is about learning through doing, prototyping, iterative approaches, evaluation and learning, and diffusion of the learning. So all of this obviously chimes with all of the work that Nesta has been doing for many years, and the approach that Nesta's been taking for many years.
Yeah, and I think part of the challenge is that all of the parts of that process need to be resourced and need to be in place. From the kind of the ideas level, often people who are quite close to the front line in councils. I know a lot of your innovation lab work is with councils. One of the things that we've found on some of our programs, trying to kind of support councils and other public bodies to do more innovation projects and more experiments, is actually how they then get buy-in to the next stage of that, having tested something. And sometimes what proves frustrating for the people who are involved in those delivery roles is that they can't get any further, that there's perhaps some sort of blocker above them. Have you found anything through have you found the same sort of challenges in your innovation lab work, and have you come up with anything, or have your partners come up with anything to kind of get through some of those barriers to like the next step of innovation work?
I think it's about taking a co-creative and design thinking approach from the outset and involving a wide range of stakeholders and those that are going to be impacted, citizens that are going to be impacted right from the beginning, using that co-creative design thinking approach, so that you have the buy-in from the beginning, and not, as is often done, not involving them at all until it actually comes to the implementation stage.
Yeah, makes sense. So we should talk a little bit about Wales. We're both based in Wales. I mean, how do you think being physically in Wales has shaped CAT's work and its mission historically? And are there anything that Wales is doing as a nation which you think other parts of the UK should try to emulate?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that being in Wales, being situated in Wales, has been fundamental to shaping CAT's work and its mission. And being in Wales has given us far greater access to influencing Welsh government and policymakers than perhaps we would have had at a UK level. We've got plans for a major redevelopment at CAT. So we've got plans for a major redevelopment of the CAT site. And the working title for that is Cynefin. So Cynefin, which is spelled Cynefin, it is often translated into English as habitat, but it has a far richer meaning than that. It hasn't really got a direct translation in English. And it's really about people and place, and the relationship between people and place. And for me, CAT has evolved in response to Earth Lingua and Quarry Home and to the environment in which we're based. So for me, that is really important. That sense of place is really important to how we have evolved over the years. And in terms of the second part of your question, I think that Wales, what we've got in Wales, which is absolutely amazing and world leading, is something called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So for those in the audience that are based in England or perhaps haven't heard of it, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act requires all policymakers in Wales, so government, councils, and all statutory bodies that are funded, that have statutory funding, to consider the well-being of future generations in all of their policies, in all of their strategies, policies, and plans. And this is a fantastic piece of legislation, a world-leading piece of legislation that now other countries around the world have implemented similar legislation. And yeah, I think it's something that Wales is leading on. We're also one of the best nations in the world at recycling. And I think that going back to what I said about Cynefin, I think that it's something that Wales is world leading on sustainability and would like to be to lead on the transition to a zero carbon economy as well.
it sounds like you're quite an advocate of place-based approaches. What is there something that you think is missing, perhaps at the something that's missing to support people and communities to deliver place-based approaches to things like heat decarbonisation or the energy transition? Like, there's probably quite a lot of will on the ground from people who want to do something in their own community, but what's perhaps missing to support and enable people to do what they want to do in their own area?
So I think it goes back to a lot of the things, the principles of the innovation lab. So that it needs to be co-creative. So we need a wide range of perspectives within the local community. So we need to engage with them from the outset, and we need to make sure we need to be actually proactive in ensuring that we engage with a wide range of stakeholders and not just the usual voices, so that we actually can co-design solutions that are fit for purpose and feasible. It needs to take a design thinking approach, so it needs to be user-centered. So we need to base it on the experience of those that are actually going to be impacted by the problem, and actually listen to people right from the outset. So yeah, so for me, it's the different elements of the innovation lab methodology that we use, the co-creation, the design thinking, the experimentation, the sense making, and it's systemic. So that for me is important in taking a place-based approach.
So perhaps just need to think about things that can do that more consistently in some sort of vehicle that brings all those elements together, perhaps on a more permanent basis. So it's not something that kind of appears and disappears depending on whether somebody
absolutely
is kind of coming in to do a project and then disappearing. Kind of that's something to avoid. So I've got a few more questions for Eileen, but just a reminder to our audience that I'd like to come on to questions from you as we move along. The comments box is the place to submit your questions, and please do keep them coming in. So just turning to sort of the back to Nesta and our mission work. Obviously you have quite a wide brief at CAT, thinking about everything from energy to food and wider sustainability, but we're very focused on buildings and heat, which obviously you've done a lot on. Mentioned installing a heat pump in 1976. We're relative newcomers to heat pumps compared to that, but thinking about, like, from a householder's point of view, what does a future home look and feel like in CAT's vision? Do you have a sort of, how would you describe the homes that you would hope to see people living in the future in a net zero Britain?
So in 1975, as I said earlier, CAT approached the Waits building company to build the house of the future at CAT in 1975. And the architect that designed that house, Peter Bond, and his design team spent the first month investigating solar collection before abandoning it and coming to the realization that the answer was to not lose that energy in the first place. So the Waits Conservation House, which is still here at CAT, is still one of the most insulated houses in Europe, and it still beats most of the houses being built in the UK today. And it predated Passive House by a decade. It was, as I said earlier, it was heated by an air source heat pump. And many of the principles that we first demonstrated in the Waits Conservation House in 1975, we'd still stand by today. So in CAT's Zero Carbon Britain Rising to the Climate Emergency report, we made a number of recommendations. So first of all, in relation to building fabric, all new houses need to be built to the Passive House standard or similar. However, only 1% of housing in the UK is new build. So we need a mass retrofit programme of existing dwellings, addressing insulation, glazing, draft proofing, and heating controls to reduce overall heat loss from UK homes by 50%. We also need improved insulation, shading and ventilation to reduce the overheating of buildings in summer. And then in relation to heating, we recommend that most space heating is met by heat pumps, plus solar power for some of the hot water. A small proportion of heating can be met by geothermal heat where available, or where heat pumps are not practical, with biomass or direct electric heating. Smart controls and thermal stores to help grid balancing by heating up at off-peak times. And then other recommendations that we'd make in relation to energy use. We need to reduce the electricity demand from domestic lighting and appliances by around 60%, using better design and controls, and switch to all electric cookers. And we need to use appliance smart controls and battery storage to help balance the electricity grid, for example, by avoiding importing energy at peak times.
You mentioned smart controls a few times. This is something that we're looking at again at Nesta. The idea that a lot of the way people use energy might be automated in the future, like something that I think a lot of the system operator imagines quite a lot of energy demand being centrally controlled, and ideally that being done in a way that doesn't make people less comfortable or doesn't annoy them in some way. And we've been doing some testing of that at Nesta, including our heat flex project. I just wondered if you've done any work specifically on how to make that work, or people's experiences of it, perhaps any of the concerns people might have about automating demand and smart controls. Have you done anything in that space that you want to tell people about?
We haven't done anything. Haven't done any work specifically on that I'm aware of. Obviously, we've had over 2,000 graduates graduate from CAT, and all of them have produced dissertations as part of their
didn't read all of them.
I haven't read
no. Okay.
2,000.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So it may be a student listening who's like, oh, actually, I did research on that, but they haven't, that I'm aware of.
Well, if they are, they can pop it in the comments and we'll all have a look. But yeah, okay.
Or if anyone's interested, I can find out if a student has done research specifically on that. But I think it would follow a lot of the recommendations that we would make more generally in relation to heat pumps, or in relation to any other new technology for sustainability. It's about education, it's about training, it's about the, I know with heat pumps, for example, there's a number of issues with them being poorly specified, poorly installed, and by people not understanding how to use them. So it's about the education and training of the people doing the specification, the people doing the installation, and the people using them. So it's that, and it's the same approach. So CAT is unusual as an environmental organization, and they were very practical and solutions focused, and that kind of practical hands-on learning pedagogy runs through all of our educational offer. So it's about that, basically. It's about just people understanding.
Again, the demystifying point, isn't it? If people have seen it and experienced it, it's part of the barrier that people face.
Exactly.
So we have a couple of questions lined up, so that's great. But again, one more prompt for anyone else who's got a question for Eileen to pop it into the comments section. One or two more things from me. So you mentioned earlier that part of one of CAT's mantras is that we have the technology already to get to net zero. Essentially, we don't need to invent new things. There's perfectly good technologies out there. That's very similar to the approach like Nesta's taken with heat pumps. They're a good solution, and people shouldn't feel they have to wait for a better solution to take action. But I'm interested if there are like specific technologies that you're particularly kind of concerned about that are perhaps that people imagine will play a role in net zero, but that you think are unlikely to play that role, either at a whole system or a building level. Like, is there anything that you think people should be placing less emphasis on?
Yes. So first of all, hydrogen. So CAT's Zero Carbon Britain Rising to the Climate Emergency report proposes creating synthetic methane gas using hydrogen for uses including grid backup power stations, industry such as iron, steel and ceramics, and some forms of transport such as air travel using synthetic liquid fuels. The reasons for this is that the flexibility and energy density of the synthetic fuels offer is much more important for these purposes than for home heating, for domestic heating. So synthetic fuels can be created by combining green hydrogen with carbon from UK grown biomass. And these are much easier than hydrogen to distribute using existing networks. So in a few applications, pure hydrogen may work, and as new processes are developed, the overall efficiency of making both hydrogen and synthetic fuels could be improved. And secondly, carbon capture and sequestration. So the zero carbon Britain scenario, zero carbon Britain model, doesn't use carbon capture and storage from either fossil fuel or biofuel combustion. This is due to limits on what proportion of the carbon can be captured, the increasing environmental impact and cost of extracting fossil fuels, the risks of leakage from underground stores, and limits on the storage capacity available. We do, however, include carbon sequestration from from natural sources. So forest area is doubled to 24% of the land area of the UK. Roughly 1/3 of this is left unharvested, and 2/3 are harvested for timber. Restoration of 50% of UK peatlands, using more timber and other plant-based materials for buildings and infrastructure, and converting waste wood either into biochar for soils or leaving it in silo storage. This carbon sequestration in our model isn't for widespread offsetting, but to balance specific non-energy emissions, including aviation emission effects at altitude, carbon emitted directly from processes like iron, steel, and cement production, or methane from livestock. Some of those activities are also reduced in the scenario, for example, promoting low meat diets and less flying.
Yeah, so you're very much in the space of kind of reducing emissions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very focused on that, perhaps more ambitious on that than some of the other like pathways, which imagine much more kind of carbon capture and things. Yeah.
I don't know if you were going to go on to asking that, but I didn't say about the zero carbon Britain what it was, and maybe I should say at this point. So Zero Carbon Britain, we first published our first Zero Carbon Britain report in 2007. So long before net zero was a goal of governments, councils and businesses around the world. And Zero Carbon Britain is a model of how we can get to net zero in the UK by 2050 or earlier using existing technology. So we do this. Our model is much more focused on powering down than other models. So we power down energy demand in buildings, transport and industry, and we power up clean energy supplies from renewables, and we transform what we eat and how we use land, and doing that we can get to net zero using technology that's already available today.
Yeah, there's lots to dig into in the Zero Carbon Britain reports. Definitely recommend people take a look at them. I'm going to go to some of the questions we've had through in the chat now. Had an interesting one from Nicholas Guy Picton Taylor, saying there are still probably at least 1 billion people in the world without access to electricity. A huge opportunity for entrepreneurs. Any thoughts from Kat? I'm not sure how I'd answer that one, Eileen, to be honest, but so over to you. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
I'm not sure how I'll answer either, but I'll give it a go. So we have, I said earlier on that over the years, Kat has spun out a lot of sustainable businesses. One of the first ones was something called Dillis Engineering. So Dillis Engineering was founded here at Cat in 1982. And the work of Dillis was all initially was working overseas, working in countries that didn't have electricity connection or working in off-grid locations. developing renewable technologies in those countries. And Dilys still continues to do a lot of work globally on renewable technologies, although it's no longer part of CAT. And I said they also manufacture and export the solar-powered fridge for use in off-grid locations around the world. Our students, CAT is, I said we have over 700 master students studying with us currently. Those students are based all over the world. So at the moment, CAT is an unusual delivery model. You can either study here at CAT on site, which is my preferred option because I think that you get that real hands-on immersive experience. At the moment, if you're elsewhere in the world, at the moment you have to study by distance learning because we haven't got what is called a Tier 4 license to bring international students to the UK, although we are going to be applying for that in the next year. So, but at the moment we have students all over the world studying with us all over the world that join all of our lectures by distance learning. We've got really good at doing distance learning, particularly over the last 5 years. And those students actually bring a hell of a lot to the course. So one of the fantastic things about studying at CAT is the students, lots of our students are already working in sustainability, are already working in the industry and are working all over the world. So they bring, a lot of our international students are working at a really high level in their countries, often implementing energy plans in their countries. And they bring that knowledge and skills and experience to our students here in the UK. It's a real kind of symbiosis and sharing of knowledge, skills and experience. So that, in terms of CAT, that is the way that we are working to implement solutions and to share solutions globally.
Yeah, it's like,
over the years, CAT has inspired. So over the 50 years that we've been going, and I've worked for CAT on and off over a 24-year period, we're constantly approached by organizations globally wanting to set up CATs in their countries. So there's lots of organizations all over the world that were inspired by CAT to set up centers for alternative technology in countries all over the world.
Yeah, I think it's back to the place-based thing, isn't it? That, you know, the solutions may look somewhat different in different areas, but that also something that's developed in a completely different context could have some insights for back here in Wales. So yeah, it's really exciting to have those collaborations with international students. A couple more questions that we've had through. So Claire Durkin from National Energy Action, the fuel poverty charity, has asked, how do we design the transition to net zero in a way that accommodates rather than simply compensates for the fuel poor? So we talked about insulation, but is there anything else that, in terms of people in fuel poverty and net zero?
So for me, it goes back to the approach of our innovation lab, and that taking a co-creative approach, a truly co-creative approach that truly involves citizens from the outset in designing the transition. So that co-creative approach involving all stakeholders and really doing that, like, mapping out stakeholders is really important in designing the transition and taking that design thinking, user-centered approach, and listening to people that are impacted by the problem. So for me, it goes back to that co-creative design thinking approach. We also, it's something that we're beginning to do a lot more work on. So we have an information service at CAT, or we had an information service at CAT. It hasn't got funding at the moment, and we want to work, or we're looking at getting funding to work much more in the fuel poverty area, because historically it hasn't tended to work with those groups. So I think it's something there is definitely a real need for.
Yeah, and I think part of it is thinking about what I completely agree with everything you said in terms of like involving the people you're talking about in the design and planning of things, but it's also probably thinking about when, in terms of retrofitting homes and changing people's homes, upgrading it, like who gets what when. Like it's probably not necessarily the case that you would be trying to give, as a solution to fuel poverty, wouldn't be trying to give people like a heat pump necessarily in 2024, although it absolutely could work in some people's homes. It's thinking about who you're targeting when over the whole of the kind of net zero trajectory, isn't it? And perhaps giving people some help with their energy bills that also takes them a few steps closer to having a home that's ready for electric heating later, and making sure you don't just do the fuel poverty bit and miss an opportunity to kind of put the home on the right pathway to net zero, I guess is the way to think about it.
Yeah, I think so. And we've been doing a lot of work with councils and housing associations as well, working with them to help them find solutions. So is what the Zero Carbon Britain Hub and Innovation Lab. There's a number of different elements to it. So we provide training, carbon literacy training for councils and communities. We've got specific carbon literacy training for housing associations. And then the Innovation Lab, we've run numerous innovation labs over the last 3 years. So, for example, we ran one with Staffordshire councils, where we worked with all of the councils across Staffordshire at county, community, district, and city level. And the findings from that lab, there's a whole lot of recommendations for other councils that came from that lab, and the Innovation Lab, those reports are available on our website, as are all the Zero Carbon Britain reports. So I said we published the first Zero Carbon Britain report in 2007, but since then we've published numerous Zero Carbon Britain reports, and those and all the reports from the Innovation Lab with recommendations for policymakers, for councils, are all available on our website.
Yeah, and lots of really good practical suggestions in all of those reports. So we're coming towards the end of the session. So I just one final question. I kind of perhaps combine one from the chat with a question I've been planning to ask you anyway. So Sue Linney, who's from Innovation Force, has asked what have been the most successful techniques to get people to take climate action, and sort of building on the theme of success as a final question, what would you say is CAT's biggest success story over the whole of its history?
So for me, CAT's biggest success story is actually the regeneration of our Llangwren Quarry home. So the transformation from a brownfield industrial site into a thriving wildlife haven and productive organic vegetable gardens. And that home then provides this background, it provides an immersive experience to which has inspired generations of school children and students and change makers to go on and have impact in their communities. And for me, it's that hands-on, practical, creative, immersive experience that runs throughout everything that we do. And that is what inspires, I think it chimes very well with the work that Nesta's doing. And it's about, that you actually, it's not enough to just tell people, you actually need to involve them and enable them to experience firsthand new technologies.
So that's been great. I'll start wrapping this up, but thanks, Eileen, for your time. Really impressive to hear about everything that CAT has done and is still doing, and all the ambitions you've got for the future. You've got me pondering whether I could fit a CAT course in alongside mission managering. Not
you
sure
definitely
if I could,
can.
but I could. I'll still have a browse on the website, and obviously anybody who's interested in finding out more, everything is there on CAT's website, all the reports that Eileen's talked about. Hope everyone else has found it interesting. So just to say, now that we've reached the end, I'd be really grateful if people in the audience could please fill in a short survey that my colleagues have just popped into the chat. And as a thank you for filling out the survey, you'll be entered into a prize draw to win a £50 bookshop.org voucher. If you haven't already, please sign up for Nesta's newsletter and you can find out about any more events coming up and everything else that we do. Just to flag at a specific event, Eileen was talking earlier about the Future Generations Act in Wales. So coming up on the 7th of May, we have another free online event where Derek Walker, who's the Future Generations Commissioner for Wales, who looks after that work and helps supports public bodies in delivering it, will be in conversation with Rob Ashelford, who's the head of Nesta Cymru, exploring the role of innovation in tackling society's greatest challenges, how to overcome the barriers that prevent progress, and how to turn ambitious missions into real action, which both organisations have a lot to say about. So it's another good event for anyone interested in public policy, future thinking, and long-term governance. And of course, you can sign up via Nesta's website. So that's it, really. Just to say thanks again, Eileen, for coming on today and giving us all your time and telling us about everything you do. Thanks to everyone in the audience and all the folks behind the scenes making this event work. And see you at the next one.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.